Perfect. How many of you are here for the first time? Look at this. This is very cool. So welcome to Port Orchard, and in particular Slaughter County Brewing. Please welcome tonight's moderator, our friend and editor, David Nelson. David?
Thanks, Mike, and thanks to everyone for coming. I'm a first-timer here also, and this is a cool place, so it's fun to do it. This is very simple. We're getting a late start, so we'll try to hustle so we're not out too late. But what's going to happen is I'm going to invite our two guests up here. They each will take a couple minutes to explain initiative, what number are we? 1433, right? We'll both explain. I'll give them each a chance to explain that, and then it's Q&A from then on. This is your chance to ask questions, your chance to get an explanation of what this is all about. I have questions, but I haven't used them in 2 meetings, and I don't want to tonight. So please be active. Please ask them questions, challenge them on their positions, and let's make this fun. So if you guys want to join me? And Jack's first, so he gets introduced first. Jack Sorensen is with Raise Up Washington. That's the committee that's proposing the initiative. And to his left is Patrick Connor. Patrick is with the National Federation of Independent Businesses, and he's speaking in the opposition to the initiative. So what I always do is read it very quickly, so we all have a basis. I'm sure you've done some research, but I'll do it real quick, and then we'll let Jack come up and speak first. Initiative Measure 1433 concerns labor standards. This measure would increase the state minimum wage to $11 in 2017, $11.50 in 2018, $12 in 2019, and $13.50 in 2020, and require employers to provide paid sick leave and adopt related laws. So, we're going to hear Jack's position first.
Thank you very much. Well, hi everyone. Thanks for having us out here tonight. Really appreciate it. First of all, just a little bit about myself. I know this is an accounting forum, so it's a little weird, but I like to know the people I'm in a room with, and I like them to know me. I don't get to the peninsula that often anymore. Sometimes I'm out here to see family friends, but I was born in Keyport and grew up there until my folks moved us to Spokane Valley, Washington, and that's where I went to high school and spent the rest of my time. And now I live in Tacoma for a while and now in Seattle. My girlfriend is in the back. She came here. She's my travel partner tonight while I'm driving around the peninsula, so I appreciate that. But we're here tonight to talk about Initiative 1433, which is a very important initiative on your ballots, which are going to arrive in your mailboxes in the next 48 hours. Can't believe it, 20 days from now, and we'll be done with this election, and it's exciting. Initiative 1433 is going to lift up Washington workers and families and boost our economy. And it's going to do that in 2 ways. First of all, Initiative 1433 will allow more than 1 million Washington workers who currently don't have a single hour of paid sick leave to finally start earning paid sick and safe leave. And it allows them to earn 1 hour for every 40 hours worked. And that's important, because when 1 million Washingtonians don't have access to paid sick leave, it puts the health of our entire communities at risk. That's why this campaign has been endorsed by groups like the National Physicians Alliance, the Washington Chapter of Family Physicians, the School Nurse Organization of Washington, and the Washington Academy of Pediatricians. Because when restaurant, grocery, and childcare workers don't have access to paid sick leave, and they have to decide between staying home to take care of themselves or a sick child and losing a paycheck, it puts all of our health at risk. Nowhere is that more important than in the restaurant industry. According to the CDC, 70% of all food-related stomach flu outbreaks start with a sick food handler. And at the same time, 1 in 5 food service workers report going to work sick out of fear of losing their jobs. Paid sick and safe leave is a common sense policy that, again, will help prevent the spread of disease and keep customers and our families safe. Secondly, as you know, and as more people tend to want to talk about, Initiative 1433 will also raise the minimum wage for more than 730,000 Washington workers. And it'll raise that wage to $13.50, phased in over 4 years. By raising the minimum wage for more than 730,000 workers, this initiative will put $600 more in the pockets of a minimum wage worker every single month. if they're currently making minimum wage. And what's important about minimum wage workers is when a low-wage worker earns more, they spend more. When a worker who right now is having to decide between paying the rent or paying utilities or going back to school shopping for their kids or getting their car fixed, when they have more money in their pocket, they're not going to invest in the stock market. They're going to go out and finally be able to afford the things that they've been putting off because they haven't before. And that's why the Washington State Budget and Policy Center estimates that this initiative will inject $2.5 billion in spending into our economy every year. Now, I know what probably all of you are wondering. Well, what about all the talk that we've heard about raising the minimum wage being bad for jobs, about it killing jobs? The fact of the matter is we've been hearing that for almost 80 years. But every time that the opposition has said that the sky's going to fall when we raise the minimum wage, it hasn't fallen. In fact, according to data from the U.S. Department of Labor, over almost 80 years of raising the federal minimum wage, every single time, except when this country was in the middle of a recession, but every other one of those 24 times we have raised the federal minimum wage, national job growth across this country has immediately followed it. More recently, according to Department of Labor data, in every single state that raised its minimum wage in 2014, they saw faster job growth than states that left their wages stagnant. And the reason for that is, again, when minimum wage workers earn more, they spend more. And that's been proven over and over again. And despite the same projections and same claims about the sky falling, either federally or in every state in 2014, or 18 years ago in this state, when we raised the minimum wage by a popular vote and the exact same opposition groups made the exact same argument, the sky didn't fall then, and it's not going to fall now. Now, I absolutely know that there are business owners who oppose this initiative. Of course, there are always people on both sides of an initiative. But it's also important to know that business owners support this as well. We have endorsements from groups like the Greater Seattle Business Association, which, contrary to their name, is actually a regional chamber that represents nearly 1,300 business owners across Washington, including here on the Kitsap Peninsula. We also have an endorsement from the Main Street Alliance, which represents hundreds of business owners across Washington. But this isn't just something we're saying locally in Washington State because Washington business owners might tend to lean more progressive. In fact, back in January, there was a poll that was leaked, and this was a poll that was done by Frank Luntz, who's a famous Republican pollster. And it was an inside poll that the National Chamber of Commerce had their business owners polled about issues which included the minimum wage. And out of the 1,000 business owners that were polled, small to medium business owners, 80% of them said that they supported raising the minimum wage in their state. 80% of them. Which is shocking, and it's definitely shocking based on what you can continue to hear from opponents year after year after year. But the fact of the matter is, raising the minimum wage will boost Washington's economy. And right now, the current state minimum wage of $9.47 is not enough to afford a one-bedroom apartment and other living necessities anywhere in this state, and that's according to the National Low-Income Housing Coalition. Anywhere in this state. Raising the minimum wage to $13.50 over 4 years is not an approach that's based on the more expensive regions of our state. In fact, the two most expensive regions in our state have already raised their minimum wage to a higher number than in this initiative. This is the modest, middle-of-the-road approach that makes sense and that the coalition has been working on in Olympia for 4 years. But unfortunately, every single year, the same business lobbying groups that are opposing the initiative now have killed attempts to raise it in the legislature. So that's why we're here now. Because Washington workers and families cannot wait any longer. And Initiative 1433 is going to make Washington a better place to live, work, have a business, and raise a family. Thank you.
Good evening, I'm Patrick Connor with the National Federation of Independent Business, representing some 8,000 small business owners here in Washington State, more than 350,000 across the country. And to give you a sense of our membership, ours are really the smallest of the small businesses. The average member profile is 5 or fewer employees, gross revenues of about $500,000 or less. I'm curious, do we have any small business owners in the audience today? All right, well, we may have a couple here that agree. I think it's fair to say most employers, including the small business owners that I know, want to attract and retain the best possible workforce. Certainly, pay and benefits is a key component of being able to do that, but the compensation must be commensurate with the value the worker brings to the job. A business owner will add employees when the sales or revenue resulting from the new hire will be greater than the cost of adding that employee, or when that new employee will save the business more money as a result of that hiring. Given the current federal and state political environment, some of which we heard this evening, coupled with the Wall Street recovery that's largely bypassed Main Street, small business owners are reluctant to hire. Based on our monthly surveys that we do, and they're available online at NFIB.com, only a net 10% of small employers plan to add workers at this time. They've reported that sales were down in the last 3 months compared to the 3 months prior for more of them than saw any kind of uptick of sales during that same time. Their earnings have been down, comparing quarter after quarter for more small businesses than those who are reporting higher earnings. And the number of owners who were forced to cut prices exceeded the number who were able to raise prices, hoping to be able to increase revenues in the coming quarter. Not surprisingly, small business owners are pessimistic about the economy. And what they're hearing from Washington, D.C. and from Olympia, a strong likelihood of higher taxes, more regulations, continued gridlock is a cause for alarm. Add $1.50 an hour increase to the minimum wage come January 1st, 2 months from now, which is what 1433 proposes, and we've got a recipe for job losses, not for job growth. Traditionally, most minimum wage jobs required little training, education, experience, or skill. They were the entry-level, seasonal, and temporary jobs that saw significant turnover. They served as the very first rung on the career ladder for almost, I imagine, all of you, as it did for me, on the way to continue my education and then moving on a career path later on in life. Today, minimum wage increases are driven more by political than economic forces, and employers are justifiably expecting more from workers as a result. They will expect more productivity as wages increase. And it's becoming more and more difficult, with particular Washington State's high minimum wage, and the higher minimum wage on top of that proposed by 1433, to expect employers to be able to pay for on-the-job training on some of those soft skills you don't learn in the classroom. Things like how to deal with the customer, how to show up on time, how to dress professionally, how to answer the phone. A number of those soft skills that we all learned at our very first job, working part-time, likely for minimum wage. Employers simply cannot afford to hire inexperienced, low-skilled workers at what equates to $21,000 a year under today's current minimum wage, let alone $28,000 for the minimum wage once it hits $13.50, as this initiative proposes. And we're already seeing the effects of these artificially high minimum wage jobs, especially on our younger workers. Small employers who are trying to hire are reporting half are finding few or no qualified employers for existing openings. 24% this last month reported that they were unable to fill existing vacancies. That's down from August's high, in the 30 years we've been tracking this, of 30%, who said that they had openings that they simply couldn't fill with the candidates who applied. It has to be at least assumed that the mismatch between wages and skills is a significant factor. Again, as wages increase, employers are going to expect more of those workers. And in Washington State, our, until last year, highest in the nation minimum wage, we think it was a direct correlation to the chronically higher youth unemployment rate that we've had in Washington State compared to the national average. And in fact, I would add, yes, in this 18-year experiment we've had since we leapfrogged the minimum wage and indexed it to inflation, which is just what 1433 proposes to do, Washington State has had as high or a higher unemployment rate than the rest of the nation in all but I think 3 of those years. And that includes Seattle's red-hot economy being part of the driver there. 1433 contains no training or teen wage, making it more difficult than, again, at $13.50 or $11 an hour as it would be on January 1st, for small employers to be able to bring on those first-time workers. Again, teens, others with little or no training. Certainly, they're not expecting to see a 16% increase in their revenues over 2 months, nor are they expecting to see a nearly 50% increase in their revenues over 4 years, even though this initiative calls for a 43% increase in wages over that same time. And keep in mind, as wages go up, so do payroll taxes, and those are almost all borne by the employer. In addition, wage compression becomes a serious issue. Workers who are making close to the minimum wage now, say $10 to $15 an hour, will expect to see a pay bump on January 1 when the $11 an hour new minimum wage takes effect. So if you're making $12 an hour, you're probably going to expect to see about a 16% increase, just like the folks who are just hired at minimum wage. If you're making $15 an hour, I'm sure that you will expect to see a 16% or higher wage bump as a result. So that shift supervisor or assistant manager who's making $15 an hour now, in 2 months, will cost their employer $5,341 more in 2017 than they did in 2016. Every astute employer is going to be forced to ask themselves, will this worker generate enough sales to cover the added cost? Or can I raise my prices or find something else to cut if not? If prices can be raised, then yes, those workers who are receiving a minimum wage increase will see a few more dollars in their paycheck, but they're going to pay more at the check stand, and so will all of us. If the answer is no, if that worker cannot generate more sales, if prices can be increased, then those employers are going to have to look for other places to find the money. So what do? Do you make cuts? The employers, the small businesses who survived this Great Recession, have done so by cutting to the bone. They've delayed capital improvements, they've delayed putting in new equipment, replacing equipment, adding positions. There aren't thousands of dollars per worker available to add to increased payroll costs come January 1st. So what are the other alternatives? Hours, benefits, and yes, potentially jobs could be cut. Are we saying the sky is falling? No. But when you increase costs, when we can't increase our sales or our revenue, something's going to have to give. We're already seeing the big employers, big businesses, addressing this in some ways that I think smaller employers are going to have to start looking at. Does anybody remember the days of the gas station attendants? No, we all pay at the pump now because we use our credit cards and pay right there. You don't have to deal with a worker at the gas station, unless you go to Oregon, of course. You go to the grocery store. Is there a grocery store left in Kitsap County that doesn't have a self-check stand? And we're seeing more and more other types of retailers also adopting the self-check model. So they've reduced the number of clerks that are available, number of cashiers. Lines tend to be longer, and you end up having to stuff that bag yourself. Not only that, we're seeing restaurants replacing wait staff with touch screens. Heck, you can even use your app now to customize and order and pay for your latte in the morning. We're going to continue to see technology replace low-skill workers if we continue on a path to artificially raise wages without showing an additional increase in skill or productivity. In terms of paid leave, I'll touch on that just very briefly. Most small employers work pretty closely with their employees. They typically have got a paid time off policy that allows workers to be able to leave, whether it's for sick leave, vacation, to go to a parent-teacher conference, to go to a soccer or baseball game. And throughout our studies, both workers and employers overwhelmingly report they appreciate that flexibility to be able to swap shifts, to work different hours, to be able to find a way to get the work done, but also allow that worker to be able to take a day off if they're sick or if a loved one is. Unfortunately, 1433 gives us a one-size-fits-all approach. Every worker will be required to accrue at least 1 hour per 40 hours worked, and 40 hours can carry over into the next year. No matter how you look at it, that's an additional cost. So we're adding cost by wage increases, we're adding cost with a new pay benefit, and we're taking away flexibility that workers and employers at small businesses greatly appreciate. So based on that, we think that 1433 goes too far, too fast, and it's not a sound investment for Washington State's employers or for its low-skill workers, its young people who deserve to have the opportunity to have that first job, to get the skills they need to be able to grow into their career in the future. Thank you for your time and your attention.
Just want to address some of the things that you heard right there. First of all, we heard about employee turnover, and I'm really glad, Patrick, that you brought that up. Business owners do know that rapid turnover and the constant need to train new workers can be one of the most expensive parts of running a business. Sometimes it can be up to 50% of your total costs. But what we know, what we have seen in cities and states that have raised their minimum wages is that businesses of all sizes have prospered. When workers earn more and have access to basic workplace standards like paid sick leave, they stay because they're not looking for another job, which again, we have seen in study after study leads to a reduction in turnover rates, which that reduction alone can almost pay for almost entirely any assumed cost of raising the minimum wage. But I also want to touch on something that is even more important and is especially pervasive. And that's the idea that the minimum wage is a teenager's job or an entry-level job. And it's just not true. First of all, study after study, including from the University of California, Berkeley, which is one of the most prolific teams studying the minimum wage in this country and its impacts over the last 80 years, they've clearly proven that there is no correlation between the minimum wage and teen employment. Teen employment has been decreasing in Washington for a number of years. At the same time, the number of teens attending summer school has tripled. But beyond that, all it does is perpetuate a myth about minimum wage workers, that they're teenagers saving up to buy their first set of wheels. And it's just not true. In fact, it's a leave it to beaver economic idea in a modern family economy. Today, 88% of minimum wage workers are older than 20 years old. And the average age for a minimum wage worker in this state is 35. 35. Yeah. They come from all walks of life, and they come from all careers in this state. And they are absolutely food service workers and waiters and waitresses. They're also child care providers. And if you have a voter's pamphlet, do you have any voter's guide statements in here that just went out? Any of the big ones that come from the state? You should have, okay, you should have some thick voter's guide statements at home that have information about all the things that are going to be on your ballot. And when you look at our voter's guide statement, you'll see a name in there, Mary Bell. She's an EMT in Davenport, Washington, and only makes $1 above the state minimum wage, and has to work a second job because an EMT is not paid enough to afford living necessities in Davenport, Washington. Other than that, we hear about the same things over and over and over, about job losses, about price increases. And I think that I've already, laid out our case, that in every single state that has raised its minimum wage, they've seen faster job growth than states that haven't because, again, when workers earn more, they spend more. Additionally, the University of Washington team studying the impacts of the minimum wage increase in Seattle found no evidence of price increases in Seattle because of the minimum wage increase. Because again, you have thousands of people who for the first time are customers at local businesses.
All right, it's nice to hear about all these studies. For every study that the one side cites, we have ones to offset it, and it is factually incorrect, and I challenge any one of you to Google the study, to go to the Seattle Times and look at what's happening in Seattle, where the minimum wage is now $11 an hour generally, not $15. So the same thing that we would see come January 1 under 1433. The authors have specifically said that while some people are seeing more take-home pay at the end of the week, there are others who are experiencing fewer hours and job losses. They're also showing increases in various sectors, restaurants in particular. So while it may only be a few cents here or a few cents there, again, you can take a look at the Seattle Times, the Puget Sound Business Journal, and other papers that have been reporting on this the last couple of years. Ivers, for instance, at their sit-down restaurant, in order to try and deal with the change in minimum wage there, implemented a policy where they were going to eliminate tipping, which is typically around 20%, and they increased menu prices across the board by 20%. So we know that's the fact. Tom Douglas, celebrity chef in Seattle, take a look at Tom Douglas's posts on this topic. He too talked about possibly raising rates across the board to help the back of the house folks who don't get the big tips that the guys in the front of the house get. And decided to do that because he thought it was the right thing to do. Every business owner has the ability to do that right now. We don't need a law to tell us that. But Douglas, in talking about experimenting with increasing menu prices and eliminating tipping, that was one of the potentials too. So it is completely disingenuous to say that the Seattle study shows anything other than a mixed bag because both things are happening. Some folks are making more, others are taking home fewer hours, fewer jobs, and we're seeing prices go up at least in certain sectors.
Okay, now it's your turn.